Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaibhacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dhanavad Pranam devotees. So this is an extremely short presentation or video, and basically it's to establish a kind of because I some time ago did a video which I called a template in order to have a kind of perhaps foundational basis of how devotees can kind of reconcile in conversation, because there are still nuances which may need to be discussed, but at least foundationally, how devotees can find themselves on the same page when it comes to talking about the issue of the Svarupa of the Jiva. So again, there are many issues which are perennial issues. They just come up every year for some reason or another. And this one has come up again, and there's been several addresses on it. There's several books written about it. So just in most cases, you'll find, I don't think I can name really one event where the discussing parties have sat down in any place, if so, it certainly was not public, and had a open discussion with all the praman and variables brought together to have a discussion on the issue itself. So what you essentially then end up having are various people in various corners, not in relation to each other, giving their dristikon means like an angle of vision, giving their angle of vision based on what they've understood from Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. And in many cases, the premise under which they've taken a particular position is based on assumptive conclusions about the argument that they're presenting Siddhanta against. So in other words, it's like a ghost in the middle and several people around the essential ghost, and they feed the ghost with various pretty much assumptions about what their stance is. In other words, they create an argument in that ghost form that says, and I'll give the example for instance, that such and such, somebody has said that bhakti is inherent in the jiva. So on the face of the statement, there is ample room for pushback on what is meant by that, right? And I'm not going to get into details here, but I'm just saying there's ample room to give pushback on that statement alone, right? Then on the other side, you have a feeding of the ghost that says, some people say that there is no, not bhakti here, meaning there's no dasitva, means no sense of being the das of Krishna in the jiva, and that the jiva is zero, he has nothing, and that everything has to be given to him. So that's a ghost argument from the other side, and then there's an entire, angle of vision and, praman that pushes back against that. But in reality, I don't think either, even in those two examples, either side has ever come together and discovered whether that's the actual argument being made, or is that the actual discussion on the table, right? So in these particular two cases, I've not, in the broad reading of everything, seen either one of those statements. That somebody has said that bhakti is inherent in the jiva, the bada jiva. I've not heard. You can assume that statement from certain writings. And when I say someone here, I mean someone acharya, right? Not because there may be many people, according to their understanding, may have an idea. But among our contemporary Guru Vargas especially, because a lot of times that's where it boils down to, they've used the term that the Svarupa of the Jiva, Bhakti, is there in a dormant or unmanifest stage, etc., etc. And I did a whole video on this before, as well as many other people. So mine doesn't have to be singled out, but many people have done, discussions on this. So again, what they actually meant by that statement, because again, I mentioned many times, and it has to be brought to bear because it's a fact, that if you actually read what our contemporary acharyas have written, they have mentioned that the Swarup, the Rasa, Bhakti itself is inherent in the constitution of the Jiva. Right? So now you have had to have asked someone, right? What do you mean by that statement? What is the constitution of the Jiva? Because you can't assume it means it's in the Bada Jiva. But if you want to, you can use that as a way to make arguments against the misunderstanding of that. That's fine. So you can enumerate many reasons why Bhakti, which is composed itself of Swarup Shakti, right, is not present in the Bada Jiva. You can write many arguments against that statement. And this is another thing. When you go around the table, let's say you did have a table of all parties concerned, not one of the people concerned in the discussion will say that Swarup Shakti is inherent in the Jiva. This is the amazing thing about this whole thing. Not one of them will say, oh yeah, Swarup Shakti is inherent. Among those who are sort of in a major way involved in the discussion. Not one of them say Swarup Shakti is inherent in the Bada Jiva. Right? So that's one level of mutual agreement. That Swarup Shakti is not inherent in the Bada Jiva. They all say that. Now, from the other angle of argument, has anybody ever really taken the time to really consider what the statement inherent in the Constitution means? So, of course, I've put forward the argument, having read it from my Gurudev's biography of his Gurudev, my Param Gurudev, and in many other places, the explanation that the word constitution refers to the perfectional stage of the Jiva, meaning the descent of Swarup Shakti when you're practicing Bhakti. When Swarup Shakti descends, it has revelatory power to reveal the perfectional form, rasa, particular staibhav. Everything is revealed when there's the descent of Swarup Shakti. Is there anybody on any side of the table who disagrees that in the perfection, all of these things are inherent there? Nobody. In other words, when Swarup Shakti descends, will it reveal all of these things? So we've already said that Swarup Shakti wasn't inherent in the Bada Jiva, but we admit that when Swarup Shakti descends, it reveals all of these perfections. So it is inherent in Swarup Shakti that the perfected name, form, rasa, everything of a Jiva is present there. Nobody will argue against that. And this is in fact what our contemporary acharyas said. They were not saying that Swarup Shakti, right, which Bhakti is composed of, Swarup Shakti, was inherent in the Bada Jiva. Nobody ever said that, really. Right? Now, some people, in misunderstanding what the contemporary acharyas said, put forward that argument, and hence you get a pushback on it from those who say, no, because Bhakti is composed of Swarup Shakti. So, but when you really distill it down and sit down at a table with others, and you say, do we all agree that Swarup Shakti is not inherent in the Bada Jiva? Yep, amen. Everybody agrees. Does everybody agree that when Swarup Shakti does descend, that it will reveal all perfections? That everything about the Jiva's perfectional state is inherent in Swarup Shakti when it descends? From Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu verses Sudasattva Viseshatma and Avyabhuya Manovrito. When you read these verses, it's very clearly explained there. Does everybody agree that every Jiva has a potential to have a particular type of rasa? Nobody will disagree with that, because if you didn't have a potential, then you could never obtain one. Everybody agrees on any side of this discussion that yes, there's potential there for the Jiva to have a particular type of rasa. Is it possible that you can use the analogy of a seed to explain potential? Everybody agrees. Oh yeah, no harm. If you're explaining potential, Yes, there's no harm. Yes, like a seed has potential to become a particular type of tree. Yeah, that makes sense. It's an excellent analogy to describe potential for something to manifest something, right? So when you really sit down and you really put the truthful statements and things on the table, there's really not a lot of disagreement, right? When you put up the ghost argument and you make your argument based on the ghost argument on the other side, there's plenty to write about, disagree about, etc., etc. So the reason I brought this up is because for some reason or another, rather than Vada, which means discussion taking place towards a pursuit of truth in all its nuances, there's more of a mood of sides taking place. And the basis of that mood, people are creating more ghost arguments, right? And in creating the ghost argument, they're saying, well, they say. But if you've never sat down with them, how do you actually know what they say? Or you say you read it. Even if you read it, I'd want clarification from the writer. What did you mean by that? Does it mean this? Because if it means this, then I have a substantial argument against that idea. If it means something else, oh, perhaps we're in agreement. So then what begins to happen is there's not so much a search for truth, but the argument, or not argument, but discussion, which is Vada, deteriorates and starts to become Jalpa and Vitanda, right? These are three kinds of discussion, right? So if you're not familiar with them, just look them up, right? So we want Vad. We want to have some Vad, in fact. We want to have fruitful discussions that lead to the truth about a particular Siddhant, right? We don't want to start developing emotional alliances, one group in this group, and I'm in that group, and this is in this group, because it's not healthy. I've never wanted to be part of anything like that, and I'm not part of anything like that. I have understanding that I feel I've gleaned from Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. I'm always willing to sit down with anybody on any side of the table to discuss that, right, in all of its nuances, right? But from what's beginning to happen, there is a lot of this sort of division going on, and actually the very nature of Vaishnav Dharma is that Guyamapyati Prichati, one of these 6 symptoms of exchanges of Vaishnavas is exchanging confidences, which means realizations. So that would seem to be the actual platform under which Vada could take place. Real discussion. Oh, we could sit down, we could discuss, we could bring Praman, but more importantly, we can have a real look at what's actually being said. Because maybe I misunderstood what you said. Maybe I'm not clear about what it is you're presenting. And therefore, when I'm presenting my arguments, I'm presenting my arguments against what I perceived that you said. And in fact, my argument may be very right and justified by what I perceived you said, because I'm actually giving arguments on that basis. But now we're at a stage where if you really want to have some clarity, I don't care if you do it by Zoom, I don't care if you do it in person or whatever the case may be, it might be a very good idea to have a situation in which you could sit down, not even coming with the preconceptions of our group, their group, but coming in a genuine discussion. Well, first, let's put on the table what are the genuine arguments, because we may find, oh, well, no, that's not what I meant. Prabhu, Didi, Maharaj, that's not what I meant. So, my Guru Parapadma, he didn't say this. This is not what this means. Oh, no, I in what I espouse from this person or that acharya or this sastra, that's not what it was meant to say. And I'm not sure how it was concluded that that's what you thought it meant. Right? So that's the discussion that needs to be had. Any just further fighting from the corners, so to speak, and when I'm saying that, I'm hoping it's not really that bad, but so much boxing from the corners, that really has to stop. Because what it does is devotees who really may not be very insightful at all about the tattva then get into a position where they make alignments based on their particular alliances, and they actually start to commit aparad to other Vaishnavas. You understand? One way or another. So this is not a very healthy profile. I've never been part of anything like that. Right? And back in 2015, when I was originally having this discussion with some people who were from actually the traditional pariwars, quote, and I had an epiphany then that there was a big misunderstanding about even what they perceived was being said by our contemporary Guru Vargas. right? So for me, that was an epiphany, that discussion in 2015, and that led me to be more careful about examining closely what is actually on the table as the discussion. But I've seen more in contemporary times, and not so much discussions with the Pariwars, but within our Gaudiya Mandal, right? So much discussion, and in that discussion, so much quoting of things that actually have not been said by either side. So now what's essentially happening is that ghost arguments are being put forward, and a whole position is being put forward on the basis of a ghost argument, right? So let's do that. There may be very many nuances, and in the ghost argument, both sides will actually appear to be very right. Because if you put up a ghost argument and that argument is something that's not Siddhantic, then when you present the Siddhanta in front of it, it appears to be very right. So now people will align, oh yeah, this is absolutely correct, right? But if you actually hear what the person said, what you may end up finding is that really, we're kind of saying the same things. And it starts to become like the 6-9 situation, where you have one person on one side of the number and a person on the other side, and from their angle of vision, it appears as a 6 or a 9. So first, we need to get that out of the way. We need to be clear. What are you actually saying? And that can only be done by addressing the person, right? You can't perceive it just from what you think they wrote. You have to talk to the person, because you want to clear, is this what you meant? This is what I read, and this is what it seems like you're saying. Is this a fact what you're saying? Because then that will tell you whether or not your argument is substantial or not. If it wasn't, right, what they intended to be said, now you have a basis for, oh, well, if this is not what you're saying, perhaps we're saying the same thing. That's if you generally want to have reconciliation in the Vaishnava Mandal. If there's a comfort zone in being in particular stances and having alliances, then that's a whole nother problem. That's a whole nother issue. Of course, I don't want to have anything to do with it at all. Right? So that's just my personal thing. So I'm insignificant. So no one should take that I don't have anything to do with it means anything, right? Except to me, right? But I've been very clear for many years that I don't want to have anything to do with that sort of thing, right? And nor will I digest any sort of rhetoric that suggests that has some implication. In terms of, oh, well, we're defending our guru, etc., etc. I'm not buying into that, sort of rhetoric, so to speak, because, first we'd have to come together and have that kind of conversation. And another thing is, if anybody had any misunderstanding about perhaps what it is I understand or what it is I've concluded or gleaned from these things, you need to ask me personally, right? And if I've ever said anything that gives a certain impression, you still need to ask me. You need to ask me, Prabhu, what did you mean by this? And how do you reconcile this? Right? Because assumptions and asking somebody else who has nothing to do with me, that's not fruitful. Right? So just a couple of things. And main thing was about reconciliation. I'm an insignificant part of the discussion. The real part of the discussion is that if this is to be a fruitful discussion and not something that's just nourishing a mutual division, which is what it's coming out to be, then people really need to find a way to come together and first put the actual questions on the table. Right? Before you get into your answer around it, first get clear on whether or not what is being said by one party is actually being said by that party. Because other than that, again, you may be finding yourself arguing against a ghost, which you essentially feed and create by perpetuating the conception. Oh, this is what they say, right? So we want to get away from that and get to a clear understanding of what is being said. So this is my humble request. Jai. Vancha kalpaturubhisya kripa sindhubevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Dandavat pranam devotees. Radhe Radhe.